What if a simple handshake left you covered in hives? That's exactly what happened to actress Cheryl Hines, and the person she shook hands with was none other than Donald Trump. In her new memoir, Unscripted, Cheryl describes a surreal encounter that took place just days after Trump survived an assassination attempt. Her husband, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., was still in the presidential race at the time, and when Trump called asking to meet him in Milwaukee, Cheryl tagged along. But what she didn't expect was that her body would have one of the strangest reactions of her life, moments after stepping out of Trump's hotel suite. The story quickly spiraled into something no one could have predicted, involving stress, politics, and a mysterious physical breakdown that left Cheryl swollen, scared, and wondering what had just happened to her. But how did a casual political meeting turn into a full-blown medical emergency? And what does Cheryl believe really caused it? Let's break it down. It all started in July 2024, just days after a shocking attempt on Donald Trump's life during a campaign event in Pennsylvania. The world was still processing what had happened when Trump personally called Robert F. Kennedy Jr., asking to meet face-to-face in Milwaukee, where the Republican National Convention was about to begin. At that point, Kennedy hadn't dropped out of the presidential race yet, and his campaign was running on tension, chaos, and controversy. Cheryl Hines, his wife, and better known to many as the comedic actress from Curb Your Enthusiasm, decided to book her own flight so she could meet up with him right after the meeting. It was supposed to be a simple reunion, a quick trip, nothing major. But when Kennedy's security team heard that Trump wanted Cheryl to join, things suddenly changed. Instead of waiting outside, she was escorted straight into the meeting, a private hotel suite buzzing with security, staffers, and political electricity. Inside, Trump greeted her warmly, shaking her hand as he began talking about the assassination attempt. According to Cheryl, he seemed animated but determined, sharing details of how close it had been and emphasizing that Kennedy needed Secret Service protection immediately. He even dictated an order to his aide, Susie Wiles, and then posted about it on Truth Social, demanding that RFK Jr. receive protection right away, even though, at the time, Trump had no official authority to make that happen. It was an intense, surreal moment, the kind of scene you only expect to see on TV. Cheryl smiled, nodded, and tried to process it all as the two men discussed matters of life, death, and politics. But the moment she stepped out of that suite, something completely unexpected began happening to her body. The second Cheryl walked out of that hotel suite, she knew something was wrong. Within minutes, her skin started to itch, then burn. When she looked down, she saw bright red welts spreading across her arms. They climbed up her torso, across her abdomen, and down her legs, a full-body rash that seemed to appear out of nowhere. "I've never broken out in hives before, not once," she wrote. But suddenly, I had hives all up and down my arms, and I could feel them spreading. At first, she tried to laugh it off. Maybe it was nerves. Maybe something in the room, the perfume, the carpet, the stress, had set her off. But one of her husband's staffers cracked a joke that made everyone stop for a second. "Guess you must have been allergic to President Trump." The line got a few laughs, but Cheryl couldn't shake the weird timing. She'd shaken Trump's hand, listened to his near-death story, and stepped out of the room, and then her body erupted like it was trying to send her a message. Still, she brushed it aside and focused on the bigger moment. Just 20 minutes later, Trump's public post demanding Secret Service protection went viral, and astonishingly, President Joe Biden issued an executive order granting it. But the news came with a strange catch. Only Robert F. Kennedy Jr. himself would be protected. Cheryl and the rest of their family were not included. As the agents began discussing bomb sweeps and security logistics, Cheryl sat quietly, feeling the hives crawl further down her body. The more they talked about threats, the more her skin burned. It was as if her body was mirroring the anxiety in the room. But that was only the beginning, because later that night, things got much, much worse. By the time dinner rolled around, Cheryl's condition had gone from uncomfortable to alarming. The hives weren't fading. They were spreading faster, now covering most of her legs. Her skin felt tight, her heart was racing, and she couldn't tell if it was from stress or something far more serious. Meanwhile, the conversation around her had taken a strange turn. The Secret Service was walking Robert through what his new protection detail would look like: bomb sweeps, security protocols, travel restrictions, everything that came with being a high-profile target. But Cheryl couldn't focus on any of it. She sat there quietly, trying to ignore the burning sensation crawling down her body. Then came the realization that truly set her off. The agents confirmed that because the protection was granted through an executive order, not through the usual nomination process, it would cover Kennedy only, not his wife or their kids. That's when Cheryl's anxiety spiked. Every other presidential candidate's family had been protected in the past, but now she and her children were left exposed. She wrote, "As they talked, I could feel my hives make their way down my legs." It was as if her body was acting out her emotions, a physical protest against the stress, fear, and powerlessness she felt in that moment. She tried to stay composed through dinner with her husband's team, but by the time she slipped into the restaurant bathroom and looked in the mirror, she couldn't believe what she saw. Her bottom lip had ballooned to the size of a baby carrot. She stared at her reflection, horrified, barely recognizing her own face. Was I still having an allergic reaction to something? She wondered. It couldn't have been President Trump. He was on the other side of Milwaukee. But the truth was, the reaction wasn't stopping. It was escalating, and what happened next would push her to the edge of a medical emergency. Back at the hotel that night, Cheryl's body was in full revolt. Her face felt hot, her skin tight, her breathing shallow. When she checked the mirror again, she could barely recognize herself. Her bottom lip was so swollen it looked ready to split, and her upper lip was starting to puff up too. Panic set in. She called down to her husband, and together they reached out to doctors for advice. The recommendation was simple but urgent. Take Benadryl, monitor her breathing, and if it worsens, get to an emergency facility immediately. Desperate for relief, she slipped into a Himalayan salt bath, hoping the warmth might calm her body down. But nothing changed. The swelling continued. The itching burned. Her nerves were shot. Cheryl later joked that she looked like a casualty from Botched, the show about plastic surgery gone wrong. When her lip began to split, she finally gave in and went to a walk-in emergency clinic. The doctor checked her vitals, ruled out a food or chemical allergy, and then asked one simple question. "Have you been under more stress than usual lately?" She didn't even hesitate. "Yes." The doctor sighed and said something that stuck with her. "Then your body is trying to tell you something. You need to find a way to not be so stressed." It was a jarring reminder. Her body wasn't reacting to Trump or to something she touched, but possibly to months of unrelenting pressure. The campaign, the media, the death threats, the spotlight. Before leaving, she was given steroids and an EpiPen, just in case things got worse. On the flight home, she sat in silence, clutching the EpiPen in one hand and covering her swollen lips with the other, counting every swallow to make sure her throat wasn't closing. It was terrifying, surreal, and strangely symbolic, as if her body had finally said enough. But this bizarre episode wasn't just a medical mystery. For Cheryl, it became a wake-up call, one that forced her to confront the real cost of living in the political spotlight. To understand what really happened to Cheryl Hines that day, you have to look at the pressure cooker she was living in. At the time, her husband, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., was running one of the most unpredictable presidential campaigns in modern history. Their lives had become a non-stop blur of rallies, interviews, and controversy. Cheryl, best known for her comedic charm on Curb Your Enthusiasm, suddenly found herself dragged into the harshest corners of American politics. She wasn't just the actress' wife anymore. Every move she made, every word she spoke, was scrutinized. The public had opinions about her marriage, her politics, her appearances, everything. And for months, she had been walking a tightrope between Hollywood expectations and political warfare. So when Trump called her husband asking for a face-to-face meeting, especially right after a violent assassination attempt, it was the definition of high tension. Everyone in that room was on edge. Cameras might not have been rolling, but the stakes couldn't have been higher. That's the backdrop to Cheryl's sudden physical collapse. It wasn't about a handshake or perfume or bad food. It was about months of fear, stress, and constant vigilance catching up to her in one explosive moment. She'd been holding it together, smiling for cameras, defending her husband, balancing her own career, but her body had other plans. The hives, the swelling, the panic, it was all the pressure she'd been bottling up, finally spilling over. In her book, Cheryl admits that she tried to laugh about it later, even joking that she might have been allergic to politics. But behind the humor, the truth was clear. The campaign had taken a real toll, emotionally and physically. And as Cheryl would soon realize, that frightening night wasn't just a bizarre coincidence. It was a warning, one that would change how she looked at stress, fame, and even herself. After the shock wore off, Cheryl started to see her reaction in a new light. The hives weren't just random. They were her body's way of waving a red flag. When the doctor told her, "Your body is trying to tell you something," those words stuck. Because deep down, she knew it was true. The late nights, the endless interviews, the constant fear that something might happen to her husband, all of it had built up like pressure in a sealed jar. That day in Milwaukee, it finally burst open. She later joked that the episode was the perfect kickoff to her new goal of being less stressed. But behind the humor was real exhaustion. She was trying to survive two worlds, the Hollywood spotlight and the political battlefield, and both demanded perfection. In her memoir, Unscripted, Cheryl doesn't blame Trump or politics for what happened. Instead, she treats it as a turning point, a strange, almost symbolic moment where her body forced her to slow down. It's the kind of story that makes you think about how far stress can go when it's ignored. Because while most people break down emotionally, Cheryl's body decided to speak out physically, through rashes, swelling, and pain. It was dramatic, yes, but also deeply human. She writes with humor and humility about it now, but it's a reminder that fame doesn't make you immune to pressure. If anything, it magnifies it. And for Cheryl, that surreal day wasn't just about politics or an awkward handshake. It was about the hidden cost of trying to hold everything together when the world is watching. And maybe that's why her story resonates. It's not just about meeting Donald Trump. It's about what happens when the stress of public life pushes even the strongest person to their breaking point. In the end, Cheryl Hines' story isn't just about a celebrity meeting Donald Trump. It's about what happens when the weight of stress finally crashes down. One handshake, one meeting, and her body erupted in ways she never thought possible. But beneath the humor and the headlines, there's something strikingly real about her experience. It shows how even people who seem confident and composed, famous, successful, surrounded by cameras, can still crumble under invisible pressure. Cheryl's hives weren't a punchline. They were her body's way of saying, "Slow down, this is too much." In her memoir, she calls it the perfect kickoff to her new effort to find calm. But whether it was nerves, shock, or pure exhaustion, that day became a vivid reminder that stress leaves fingerprints, even on the skin. So maybe the question isn't whether Cheryl was allergic to Trump, like her husband's staff jokingly said. Maybe it's about what our bodies are trying to tell us when the chaos becomes too loud to ignore. Because at the end of the day, fame, politics, and power come and go. But the body? It always tells the truth. What do you think really triggered Cheryl's reaction? Stress, fear, or something deeper? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more real stories behind the headlines.